In this video we're going to look at how we can create clocks with a new manipulate time with JavaScript. In that we've got a digital clock here and an analog clock over here, and it will illustrate some of the features around JavaScript, particularly setInterval, but also a bit of conditional logic and use of functions. Okay, let's dive on in. So we've got a little index page here in HTML, and I'm going to set up a JavaScript file. I'll have a JS folder over here, so let's create a new file which we'll call clock.js, and I'm going to we'll just put a standard bit of code in here, an iffy, a immediately invoked function expression. So we can grab something like that, just drop that in. Right, so we've got a function here that's going to be immediately invoked when it's called. We've just got a console call, this is the invocation, parenthesis here, and then we'll place all our code inside of that. It's just good practice to use this technique because it contains your code if you start loading in other lots of different libraries and features. So let's call that bit of JavaScript in. I'm going to follow the fashion to load this JavaScript in at the bottom of the page here, so I'll need a script tag. Notice in Visual Studio Code it drops you into the middle of the script tag there. That's a bit annoying. I see lots of people then do this kind of thing, which obviously would be wrong. So in Visual Studio Code you can also do script, and there's this hint in there, :src. If I hit tab on that, that's a lot better. It's put my cursor where it needs to go in the source attribute. So we've got JS, we've got clock.js, it's picking it up for me there. So let me just test this at this point. So we've got our blank page here at the moment, and I'll right click and inspect to bring up the console. There's the console. Let me just shove the console to the side. I'll make the console a bit bigger, and I'll just refresh, and what we should see in there is the hello.js, which it does. Great. Okay, so we know that we've got the architecture would be a grand word for it, but we've got our JavaScript file loading in nicely, so this is where we're going to place all our code inside of here. Okay, so first thing we're going to do is we're just going to create a DOM element on the fly. It's not really required for this little example, but it's might be worth showing you how we can do that. So we've got in our DOM, we've got this element here of ID digital clock, and what I want to do is place another div inside of that, which is actually going to contain my digital clock. So we need to target that bit of the DOM. So first of all, what we're going to do is we're going to create a new node, which I'll call my node, and we'll set it equal to document. So call in the DOM element, and then we'll do create element, and this will allow us to create a completely new HTML element, a completely new node, and we'll have a div tag. Thank you very much. Right, so that creates a div tag for us. At the moment, though, it's just sitting in the memory of the browser. It hasn't actually been attached to the DOM, so we need to attach it to the DOM. Now, looking at our index page, so I want it to go into this ID here, so we could then say document dot get element by ID, and we'd need the ID of that element, which I've immediately forgot, but it's there. It's digital clock. So that will target that DOM element, and then what we'll do is we will add our node into that, and we can do that using this append child method. So we'll say here then append child, and then we've got my node there. Right, so we've created a new div, and then we've appended it to the existing digital clock node. So let's see what that's actually done for us. So now when I refresh, it's not particularly exciting, but if I use the console here in Chrome to dig around, there's that digital clock node, and if I peel it open, there's the div tag that's been created by our JavaScript. So that wasn't there initially, but now it is. And to just, if that wasn't proof enough, we could prove that it's definitely there, because I could then say document dot sorry, we could just do it like this. We could say my node dot inner HTML equals hello there. Right, so let's try that, and over we go, and refresh, and there's our text. Okay, so you can see there's some CSS behind the scenes ready to make that look like a digital clock. Right, so we've created that DOM element. So we didn't really need to do that, but it's just an additional little bit of functionality that you might find useful. But what we want in there is we want to put in there a digital clock. So first of all, let's find out how we can get the date and the time. So I'm going to create a var, a variable I'll call my time, and I'll set it equal to a new date object. So there's a date object built into JavaScript, and this is going to, my time is now a new date type object. So what on earth does that look like? So let's have a nosy. We'll do console.dir my time, and let's go over to here and refresh this. Right, so if we go to the console, there's our hello.js, but here is our datetime object. So we can see it's Thursday, 5th of December, and it's actually JavaScript uses is what's known as a prototypical language. You see, right, it says proto there. We won't go into that just at the moment. But if we extend that open, you'll see there's loads of methods there related to. So all these methods here: get, set, to, related to dates and times. So, for example, we could find out the time in minutes, because let's comment that one, and let's say console.info my time dot, and Visual Studio Code is clever enough to know about this, so there is get minutes, and it's a method, so we need to put the parentheses on. Right, let's have a nosy, and we refresh, and it's 27 minutes past 10. Okay, now there are, say, lots of these. A really handy one would be the to-date string. So let's put this into here initially. So to-date string, and what that is going to do is give me the date as a string, like so. Okay, so let's add that into our DOM element. So if we get the hello there, let's cut that from there. And what we'll do instead down here is we'll say my node dot inner HTML equals my time dot to-date string. Great. Okay, so let's have a look over here now. Refresh, and oh, we've forgot the parenthesis there, which is what I nearly did before. You see, it's just indicated that as a function there. So it's telling us that we need to actually put the function call in, and there we go. There's the date. Now, I did promise you a digital clock though. So how are we going to do that? Well, let's look at something called setInterval. So setInterval is a built-in function inside of JavaScript, and what it will do is it will call a given function at a set interval. So you can use it a number of ways. One way is you can add in an anonymous function. So here I've got a function without a name, and I'll put some curly braces in there, and let's say console.info hi. So that would be my first parameter, and then if I put a comma here, we could indicate how often we wanted this function to get called, and this is an interval in milliseconds. So if I put in 200, that's going to be getting called every about 5 times a second. Right, so let's save that. We'll go back to the browser and refresh, and now there's my console, and you can see it saying hello lots of times, hi, 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 and you can see it ticking along there to reflect the fact that that function has been called. So you can write setInterval that way. The other way that you can write it is, instead of it being an anonymous function, like you've got there as the second parameter, you could have a function in there. So if I call this demo function, and then I create a function down here called demo function, and inside of there we say console.info hi. Right, let's try that. So it's going to do pretty much exactly the same as the previous example. There we go, it's ticking along, and so you can see that we can call a function at a given interval, which you may be jumping ahead here and thinking, I can see where this is going in terms of creating a clock. Right, so let's change this then to be every second. So these are values in milliseconds, and let's change this to a more meaningful function name. So let's call this update time. So we'll call this update time down here. We know that that's already worked, so we can safely get rid of the console. So what we could do in here is we could now say my node.innerHTML equals my time dot, let's try get seconds. It's a function, so we put the parentheses in. Right, so go back and refresh. We need to save that, and we need to get rid of this guy here. Right, so we'll try that again now. Let's go back. Now we can see it just delay a second, and then it should be ticking along, which it isn't. So what have I got done wrong here? What I need to do is grab that fella there. Let's put it into here. Right, so I've got update time now being called. Let's go back and refresh. My time is not defined. Yeah, that's because I've moved things around. Let's get rid of that from there. Boom. Right, so we can now see it ticking away. So I juggled things around a little bit there because of the variable scope. So what I've got now is I'm declaring a new time object inside of uptime. So this gets, my time gets created every second, and then we get the get seconds value from it, and then that gets added into the DOM, and you'll see it ticking away up there. Now that's obviously just giving me the seconds. So if I wanted the hours and the minutes, we've got all those as well. So we could create a series of variables here. So in this example, let's just grab the pre-prepared code there, and I'll talk you through what it's doing. It's very similar to what I was demoing. So I create my date rather than my time, and I'm using get hours, get minutes, get seconds, and then I'm concatenating them all together, and then putting all that stuff in my node. So let's try that. Right, off we go. Now you can see there's an issue there because when I'm below 10, I don't get a leading 0. So there is an issue there, and that would apply to these fellas as well. So we need a way round that. A couple of solutions. First of all, you could use a little bit of conditional logic. So we could say if hours is less than 10 or minutes is less than 10, then concatenate a 0 in at the front. That's entirely plausible. Now you might, instead of wanting to do it that way, we could refactor that a little bit. So you could create a function, let's call it checking for leading zeros. You could take in a time value, you could see whether it's less than 10 because you're doing the same thing 3 times there, and then concatenate the time value instead. So let's use that route instead. So I'm going to create myself a variable down here which has got a function in it called checking for leading zeros. It takes a time value and tells us whether we need to put 0 in front of it or not. and then that would then mean I'd need to just update my hours, minutes and seconds, these guys here, so that they all call that check for leading zeros function. Right, so refresh that. We'll have to wait for a little bit to see that trip over the edge. And while that's doing that, just see that for each of these cases, it's going to take the get hours, get minutes, and get seconds, run them through this, and see whether they need a leading zero. We can test that in 10 seconds. So returns, we've got functions return value there. Right, that's put me a bit of time. Here we go over the edge, and you see we get the leading zeros. Okay, great. So let's fix that. That's a little bit long-winded actually, because there is an even faster way of doing that, where I wouldn't actually need that function at all, because the other way that we could have done all of that is by doing a bit of string manipulation. So there is in JavaScript a method called toTimeString. So that will give us the time as a string. Let's show you what that would look like. So instead of doing all of that, we could just do this. Save that. I've got a weird dot in there. Right, so that gives us a time like so, but it gives us all this gumph at the end here, but that's fine, because what we can do is we can create a substring, because we know that we want the first 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 characters. So we can create a substring of that by, so substring is a string manipulation method, and there's lots of these built into JavaScript. So that's going to give me a string that starts at the beginning of the string and takes the first 8 characters, and that will give us our digital clock like so. Great. Okay, slight delay at the beginning when it because this is running every second. So one way around that would be to just immediately call the update time when the page loads. So we should get straight into the time, and then it ticks away because there's a delay of a second there. Right, so that gives us our digital clock using setInterval and using manipulating the date object with string manipulation like substring. What about our analog clock here? Well, for the analog clock, what we have is in the HTML, there's a div of ID clock face, which is this fella here, and then we've got 3 hands there lying flat. So we've got second hand, minute hand, hour hand, and then a pin in the middle. And the CSS for these, so we've got, where are we? This is clock.css. So there's our clock face, and we've got these 3 hands are all positioned absolutely, with a width and a height and a different colour. And I've got a width and a height, so basically they're all just, there's 3 of them lying flat there at the moment, and the fact that they're lying at that point, lying flat, means we're going to make a slight adjustment to the maths in a second, which you'll see, but there's 3 basically rectangles lying flat there to make up the clock hands. Right, so, and what we're going to do is we're going to use JavaScript to add a style directly to each of these hands. So let's just throw this one in as an initial example. So we will add this up there for now. So this is saying get hold of the hour hand via get element by ID, and then use the style property of JavaScript to add a background colour of red, green, blue, of blue to that one. So if we try that, got my RGBs wrong. Yeah, red, green, blue, so that's made that green. Let's just prove that was yellow. We would see yellow. So you can see that that's targeting the style on that element. Now the style, changing the colour is not really what we're after here. What we want to do is change the rotation. And there's a CSS transform property that we can use to do that. So if we say CSS transform, it can then take a value which is written like so. You can say rotate, and then you put a value in degrees. So if I put in 45 deg, it's going to rotate that hour hand 45 degrees. Okay, I've got rid of the colour, so it's now black, so this is 45 degrees from there. Let's try 145 degrees. You see it moves to there. So let's just quickly show you how that's doing that. So if I right click and inspect, where you can see that it's using the style, it sets a style, an inline style, which generally not really recommended to use, but great when we're using JavaScript because we can do this programmatically. So we set the style there, the transform to 145 degrees, and it was the same when, if we went back to that original example, let me just quickly put this back to background, colour, I'll set that back, I should have shown you this before, so we set that to red, we go back and just refresh, so there's that red, you can see it's been applied as an inline style there, and the great thing about that is we're going to be able to change that value, and that's where we'll bring setInterval in. Okay, so we're going to need to create some variables to hold the different rotations. So let's create a var for, which I'll call rot seconds, so rotation in seconds, and we'll set that equal to my date dot get seconds, and then we need to do a little bit of maths on this. So if I want to rotate the second hand, say 30 seconds, that's going to need to be rotated 180 degrees, so we'll multiply that by 6. Okay, and then let's apply that then to our, so with a clock hand that we want to move, with a value of rotate 145 degrees there, it's going to then place this over here. So just save me a little bit of typing. So we've got, we targeted in the second hand, and what we're going to do is we're going to transform it by the value in seconds. So we're concatenating the value in there, like so. Right, and so that value is going to change. So let's give it a whirl here. We'll go in and refresh. So you can see that ticking along. Now there is, you might notice it does appear to be slightly out compared to the digital clock. That's because initially these were at rest. So our maths here, as I mentioned earlier, just needs to be slightly adjusted, in that what I need to do is just take 90 off from there initially. And let me just place these in brackets so that we get the maths correct. Right, so let's try that. Refresh. So that's looking a bit better as we head up to the hour now. It should be pointing straight up, which it is, and then it'll go back down the other side. And you can see there, changing the values as it rotates round. Great. Okay. Minutes is very similar. So minutes, I'd create a variable called rot minutes, rotation minutes, and for that we'll use get minutes. The maths will be the same for that because 60 minutes, 60 seconds, and we'll set the rotation again. So this is inside our update time function, which remember is part of our setInterval. So this would be our minute hand, and then we've got our minute rot minutes, not rotten minutes, rotating minutes. Right, back we go, refresh. So we're on 11:38, and that does appear to be the case there. Okay, and then the hour hand, just slightly different maths here. So for the hour hand, we've got HR hand. If I remember rightly, is our hour hand. There it is. So we need now a variable for the rotation in hours. So let's create a var for rot hours, and we'll say this is my date dot get hours. We'll we'll multiply that by 30, and then we'll minus our 90. Let's put this in parentheses like so. Right, great. Ooh. Right, so we'll trundle over here, refresh, and that is now pointed at 11. You'd want a little bit of creep on that hour hand note, so in order to do that, what I'd need to add is a fraction of a hour in there. So what I'll do is that before it's multiplied by 30 there, I'll add a fraction of an hour in like so. So let's just show you what we've got going on. We're going to get the hours, and then we're going to add the minutes divided by 60 to get a fraction of an hour. We'll multiply that by 30, and then our adjustment of 90 should give us, there you go, you can see the hour hand there creeping up towards 12 o'clock. Okay, so all that can be done in the same function. It's all using the date here, and it's a set interval. It's calling this every second. Okay, thank you.